All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us and tuning in. We have a real treat. We have Mika Jacobs here joining us, and she has a degree in molecular biophysics and biochemistry from Yale University. She also has amazing experiences with EMFs and EMR. So we are going to learn so much today. I cannot wait to dive into this and really, really appreciate your time and connecting with our community today. So thanks so much, Mika. Tell us a little bit about you and just kind of starting off with a little bit of the intro on what it looks like to start to connect with you and work together.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for having me. I'm just really excited to reach out to everyone. And so, yeah, my company is called Healthy House Chicago, and I'm the sole owner and founder. I started it. I've been doing this, I think, almost 7 years now. And yeah, I had a lot of different health problems, not so much as a child, but then once I was older, different things were going on, and I was doing, all the stuff, the healthy diet, a lot of different things like that. And they helped somewhat, but eventually I got to the point where I was really able to make this connection that I had been well when I lived one place, and then I was sick, and then I was well, and I was really able to see a lot of different connection between the different places that I lived, and that how the different types of electromagnetic fields were contributing to that. And so I ended up doing training with the Building Biology Institute, and they're the only accredited training program here in the US. And at the time, that was the only program, but now, of course, EMFs have gotten bigger, so there's a lot more unaccredited online, sorts of deals. But yeah, so I, did that training and everything. We were trained by electrical engineers. I've got 20 different pieces of equipment. I had a few of them here, but there wasn't really going to be much room for everything to be showing, so there wasn't going to be enough room for everything on my table.
Absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about EMF, what it stands for, and just telling us a little bit of the background there?
Yeah, so EMF stands for electromagnetic fields. And there isn't like any such thing as like an EMF. There are a couple different types of EMFs. And so I'll just kind of briefly go into that. I don't want to bore everyone with boring conversations about voltage or something like that. But there's four main types of electromagnetic fields that are commonly found in residential homes. So there's AC magnetic fields, and there's AC electric fields, and radio frequency and dirty electricity. And so the first two, the magnetic and the electric, they've been around for 100 years since we've had, electricity. But it's the second two that have really been increasing exponentially in the past years and decades. And so, yeah, I'll go into that a little bit more. But basically, the magnetic and electric fields have to do more with the wiring. And so magnetic fields are commonly coming from power lines. They're also coming from anything with like a motor. So, your blender or the hot water heater, the refrigerator. And so those sources actually fall off very quickly. So they don't like expand over a large area. So it's easy to minimize your exposure. You just kind of, don't stand really close to them when they're operating. But the ones that are a line source instead of a point source, like a power line, those actually fall off over much more slowly, 1 over the square root of the square of the distance, not the cube of the distance. And some power lines actually, there's net current on them, so they actually fall off even more slowly than that if there's a problem, at some point, basically in the grid. And then so for electric fields, that can come from older home wiring. So if someone has a home that was built before 1965, at least in the Chicago area, the wiring there then was different. So that can be a problem. And above ground power lines have electric fields as well. And buried power lines do not, but they still have the magnetic field. So just because the power lines in your neighborhood are buried, that doesn't mean, there's still definitely fields coming off of them. And then for the other two that are increasing, the radio frequency, that's probably the one a lot of you are already familiar with. That's everything that goes through the air. So you've got, cell phone towers, all the different smart devices, Wi-Fi, airport radar, cordless phones, you name it, it's just multiplying all the time. And then the fourth one, the dirty electricity, that's kind of a mid-range frequency. So the radio frequencies are higher up in the megahertz and gigahertz range, and then the magnetic and electric are lower. They're down, they're all 60 hertz. And so what's been happening is, as we've had more energy efficient appliances and lighting, and then more electronic equipment, the 60 hertz that's been growing, there's a lot more other frequencies riding on top of that. And so in the Chicago area, you don't have to worry about dirty electricity as much, because you would have metal conduit, which is actually blocking a lot of these fields from coming off. But in the rest of the country, or if you have an older home, or if you're outside the Chicago area, then yes, dirty electricity, definitely can be a problem. And yeah, so that's basically the four different types, and we can get a little bit more into like which sources have to do with which types. But yeah, kind of just go from there.
That's amazing. I mean, I think this is going to be so eye-opening, because I feel like very few people know about this. And just to be able to see the different types and the different levels that are impacting us and our living conditions, right, in our homes, and as also in our neighborhoods. I think even just knowing a little bit more about how that's impacting our system, like when you said too, when living in one location and then moving into another, and you really notice that impact. So if you can talk maybe a little bit to the physicality of how those frequencies are really affecting our health.
Yeah, so there are different issues with different types of frequencies. I've noticed different sorts of illnesses happen. Like say, for example, with magnetic fields, a lot of people get more of like a fatigue, a heaviness, and even a lot of different more mental illnesses can kind of happen, And with radio frequency, you're going to be having more of the ear ringing, you're going to be having more of the vertigo, or maybe even a brain tumor if something is very close, And so, and a lot of it's not like so cut and dried, because it's hard, because we all have like all four types in our, in our location, in our home. So it's hard to really do a study. How would you design a study like just for like that one type of field, and there's no control group anymore, like who isn't using a cell phone, But yeah, in terms of that, like just from my own personal experience, I know I was living one place, and even when I like left the place for a week, I mean, my body temperature would go up a whole degree. So that was telling me like very clear cut, okay, my thyroid was being affected, and my cycle would shorten if I was in the worst EMF place by 2 days. So that was telling me progesterone, was being suppressed. And I, wasn't in the position to, I'd love to have been able to have tested like all these different variables, like at each different place I live. But, I've definitely just seen that with a lot of different clients, like different health issues, and correlating with what I see there on my meters.
Wow. So, I mean, again, this is something that is completely off the radar when someone is working in the conventional medicine world.
Oh my gosh.
Also, even in functional medicine, it's
Yeah.
not something that we bring up as the first thing. We're talking about gut health and nutrition and movement and sweating and detoxifying your body that way. But this adds just a completely different layer, and not to overwhelm, because obviously we're exposed to it. It can feel like whenever it talks about like detoxification and toxicant panels, sometimes that can feel overwhelming for people too, and even myself included. So it's about just almost taking it one step at a time with trying to protect your body as best as you can. And even just hearing some of your tips on this would be amazing. If you would share with us a little bit more about, like, we're exposed to this, no doubt. What can we do to protect ourselves a little bit more?
Yeah, and that's a great point about just not becoming overwhelmed, because, when you first hear about this, you think, oh my gosh, it's too much. And a lot of people will say, well, there's EMF everywhere. What can you do? Well, actually, you can do a lot, because what you really want, I mean, we can't, we're not going to move off to some faraway desert island. We all need to live a life, but you just want to be doing better than other people, like that. Maybe your level, because some homes it's 100 times higher or 1,000 times higher than other homes. So you just want to get it so that all of your levels are as low as that you can get in your home, and it's rare. I mean, there's a few cases where I've had to tell someone you really, you might have to move, but like most of the time, almost every problem, there are solutions for these, and there are simple solutions. And again, I mean, even me, I'm not doing all of them yet, just for like time reasons, because it does take, a while just to implement different things. And for me, it's been, probably 11 years now that I've known about EMFs. And so like when I am at someone's home, I am like distilling and funneling this 11 years of information into like, 3 or 4 hours, and trying to figure out how can I best, help this person with all the different tools that I have, and so, yeah, that's just one thing I really want to impart to people is not to freak out what you still have in your environment, but all think about how much better you're doing with all these different changes. Because I'm sure, all of your clients, everyone who's watching this video, they already know about the nutrition and they're doing like already so many things and they're already on the right path. And I'm sure they've all been having like major improvements, but there's always these different, like smaller subsets of people, and I know I was one of them where I'm like, gosh, I'm eating gluten-free and then I switched to all organic and I didn't even notice anything, and I thought there must be something else going on, and then just eventually when that light bulb went off in 2012 and I was able to see all the different places I'd lived and different symptoms here and different symptoms there, it was just like eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, to have that personal experience too. I remember back in, this is probably 2016, maybe 2017. One of the first conversations I had with EMF was a colleague of mine. She had been wearing her cell phone in her pocket when she would ride her horses, and she kept feeling like her right leg was weak and the muscle was feeling
Mhm.
like it wasn't as strong as the other side. And she's like, this is really weird. So she had been doing research on her own too with EMF and said, just going to stop wearing my phone in my pocket. And she immediately, within the first week of doing that, felt a dramatic difference in her body and was able to regain that strength and that right side. So
Yeah,
that, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
I've heard that story a lot where people where they have this degenerative hip and the bone, it's worn away just on the side where the cell phone is. And I've noticed a lot of different people, like you'll see people where, like especially men, if their head is shaved, like there's like a scar just on one side of their head where they had like a benign tumor or something removed, or maybe even a major one. And that, it's always the side that they were holding their cell phone. And then we've probably all heard stories about the woman who carried the cell phone in the bra and then there was like a tumor right in that spot, I mean, it's just amazing.
Yes. And whenever I see people, like even other active, like
Yeah.
young teens or young adults, and I'm like, if I see that where they have their phone and they're tucked in their bra and their shirt, I'm like, hey, just so you know, it's probably not a great idea to put that right next to your heart.
I know.
um,
I
and
know.
even just putting your phone on speaker, and maybe you can talk to some of these points too, because I feel like maybe the cell phone is what everybody has like that access to and is probably using most commonly,
Yeah.
wearing it as maybe like another limb to their body. What are some things that we can do with our cell phones to help protect our brain and to really prevent any cancer for their cellular
Right.
degradation?
Yeah, and so the first thing I want to say is that those stickers, they do not like do anything. I've measured with my meter. So if anyone here has like one of those little things that's on their phone, they think they're protecting, it's actually not a good idea because then people are talking longer thinking that that's actually helping them. And there are cases, cell phone cases too, and those can cut it down a little, but the problem is that the case, there still is that little opening. And so the radio frequency, in order for the phone to work, because if the case blocked completely, we wouldn't be able to talk on the phone. It like goes out and it like spreads and fills all the air around. And so like while your hand might be protected if it's on the case, it's really not protecting, it's cutting it a little bit. But so I know, and a lot of people finances are limited. So when I'm discussing what I think would be the best option, I always am recommending the air tube headsets. And so, because the speaker's good, I mean, that's definitely a definite step in the right direction because you're about a foot away. But you want to actually get it so that then you're not touching the phone and that you've got it about 4 feet away. And so, especially like say if you're in your car and I don't talk while I'm driving, I do pull over to the side of the road. But what if you were talking on your phone in the car, it actually, because of all the metal of the car, it bounces around and is over FCC limits. I know a friend of mine, when he had bought his new car, it actually said in there that it was over FCC limits if you had the phone in a certain spot, right? And FCC limits, are much higher than what we as in the building biology profession, think is safe. And so what I do is I actually have the air tube headset, I put it in the windshield. And so then it's going right out there. It's not bouncing around, like crazy. And And in terms of directions, I will actually look them up beforehand. And if I'm on my way to a client's, I'll already know like which exit I'm getting off at. And then I won't even have it be doing the directions, talking to me for until that last 10 minutes. So I'm only being blasted for 10 minutes, not for like an hour. And I know some people are really good and they've got everything all written down, but I think for safety's sake, I like to hear, at least. So I do
Yeah.
that, definitely to cut it down. And then just in terms of the phone itself, besides the air tube, there's a lot of things you can do. Like when you look at your phone, you want to go into the menu in settings and you want to go to Wi-Fi, and then you want to turn that off. And then you want to go to Bluetooth and then turn that off, because Bluetooth you really don't need. And if you're using Bluetooth headphones, that's actually worse than using the phone. So the Bluetooth, literally, I mean, unless you're just using it every once in a while in the car for directions, other than that, it is when it's on in your phone, it's blasting you all the time. And then with Wi-Fi, even if like say you're not connected to your Wi-Fi, like you're somewhere out, you're not at your home by your Wi-Fi, it's actually still looking. If you look there, instead of saying off, it will say not connected. And with my meters, it's ping, ping every 4 seconds. And so your body is being subjected to this. And so those are really two of the things, easy things you can do to get like the levels down so your phone just isn't emitting so much. And then hotspot, you would want to have like all these things you basically want to always have off. And then if you need to briefly use it, turn it on. But the reason I tell everyone to have it off is because a lot of people, and me included, who remembers to turn that Wi-Fi back off? You go into like Starbucks and then you leave, and then, oh my God, the rest of the day, there it is. It's been pinging me, And so just to be in the habit of just having everything off and, get to the point where with your phone, you really want it to be that you're going to be doing all of your main activities, like your Googling, your emailing, your Facebook, all the things that you do, you're going to be doing at home, and you're going to be doing it on a computer that's hardwired. That's really like the most important thing to be doing. And then just using your phone for like briefly checking the weather, just checking your messages, and I'll do that, and then I will email them back when I'm at home. So that's what I found to be really helpful. And then also there's the Find My Phone, and that is always, sending out. And then so under privacy, there's a lot of different location things. So if you turn all of that off, that's another whole level. And then you can even turn off cellular data. And so if you turn off cellular data, your phone kind of becomes like a flip phone. So you can still receive phone calls, but you're not constantly, because your phone's always like looking for things. And another thing you can do is within the cellular data menu, you'll look and you have like 50 apps, right? And how many of those are you using? You're using 5. Like no one's using those 50 apps, but those 50 apps are constantly like looking and updating and downloading. So I will go in and you just get rid of turn the cellular data to off. So you only have like maybe 4 or 5 where the cellular data is on. And then most of the time you'll have your data off, but when you have your data on, just those 4 or 5 are, radiating you, because a lot of people don't realize this, but your cell phone is actually the biggest source in your, because it's so close to you and such a strong source, and so for a lot of people, they do notice a difference when they're not using their phone as much. And then, like I said, for some people, it really is the house, like there are problems with the wiring, maybe like your neighbor has solar panels, or there's like so many different things that can go on in your home. And so if someone has like health problems and they, really have not been having much improvement, like, I mean, always I'm finding something in the home, particularly if it's a very serious illness, something like cancer, autoimmune. I mean, that especially if someone's living in the home that they were living in when they got sick, or if like a lot of people in that home have had different illnesses, or someone's had a couple different illnesses in the home. I mean, those are really kind of the biggest signs I see. And then some of it is just, there's just been such an increase in radio frequency. So even a home that was good for 20 years, now there could be, some issues that need to be tended to. So.
Wow. I'm like, as you're talking, I'm realizing how many things I need to change here.
Right.
Like, so, usually I put my phone on airplane mode thinking that that's just doing the trick, by blocking.
And with airplane mode, so it's not from the swipe up menu. You want to go into the settings menu and turn it on there, because and it really depends. So with every client, I'll be there testing all these different things on their phone, but I wanted to give everyone kind of an overview on things. But some phones, if you swipe up, then it's still radiating. It's just doing like the function as if you were on the airplane. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit bizarre. And I even had one client who thought she was being so good. She turned off the phone and she put it next to her bed. And so as I measure, I'm like, wow, there was like this crazy like ping, ping, ping on one of my meters. And then I'm like, and I checked the stuff outside, and then it turned out it was like right by her phone. And so her phone actually was so bizarre, and you needed to turn off all of these different things, the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, and the cellular data, and then turn the phone off. Because if those things were still on and then you turned it off. And so, yeah, and it's hard
Wow.
because people are always like, well, which phone is the best? And generally, like, the newer the phone, the worse it's going to be. And generally, like, Apple products seem to be more problematic for most people than Samsung, but that's not to say, that there's definitely, like, I know my older iPhone is way less EMF coming off of it than like a newer, Android. And so yeah, like the old to new thing, but it's hard because I've been hanging in here with my iPhone. I've got the 6S Plus, and I've been hanging in there with that, but I can't even do all this stuff on it now. So I had to get another phone where I can just briefly turn that one on for the apps that no longer work on the iPhone. I know, it's crazy.
Wow. I mean, it's just so eye-opening, even just to hear when you think you're turning something off, like
Yeah,
even at night when I put my phone on airplane mode, thinking that that's just cutting it and,
right.
having it in our bedroom still. It's like,
And
so, but
usually it is. And so but I just wanted to bring that up because with all of these things, it's a general pattern, but like every phone is different, whether there's some weird app on there is something with that phone or who knows, and even in every home, probably half the homes I'm in, I see something new I haven't seen before because there's just so many different things, so many, it would just be like a surgeon going into the body to do a surgery. And there's just like all these different permutations. In the home, it's like that too, with the whole electrical setup of the home.
yeah. And what's interesting too now is when you say with the Wi-Fi and turning Wi-Fi settings off is
Yeah.
we have everything that connects to Wi-Fi now. It's between Bluetooth speakers, and then you have
Right.
Netflix or
Yeah.
like any of the Fire Sticks or any of those things that, maybe even watching shows on is connected to Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Back when I was pregnant and before we were turning off the Wi-Fi at night,
Oh,
especially,
awesome. Yes.
and being able, like, making sure we, and just looking at some other copper things that we could put in the bed, but I'm nowhere near, the level that I think we need to be in our home. But even just taking some of those small steps, I feel like can make
Yes.
a big difference, but ultimately there's still so much left to learn from you. So
Yeah.
in your experience in working with clients where you're going in and you're doing the evaluation and you have your tools, you said 20 different tools that you're using and doing this. When you go in for the first time, let's say if someone has a chronic or reoccurring illness and ailments, and then you go back and they do all these changes, do you ever have a session where you go back in and you retest to make sure that everything, all the changes that they made are actually doing what they need to do?
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes people will have me out to do that. And that it really depends because sometimes like often they are concerned that some new thing showed up, and so a lot of people really are doing well. But what's interesting is I was having some clients like, I'm not feeling so good. And I'm like, that's weird. And as we went through everything, turned out they had seen an ad for something on the internet and they had bought that. And so now actually I like list out the things I don't recommend, And so, because a lot of people, there's different things like they might get these plug-in dirty electricity filters and they'll make the number go down on the plug-in meter, but it's really just moving the current from the hot to the neutral. And then now you've got current on your grounding system. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah. And then a lot of different people are using different sorts of products that are emitting EMFs, like from other healthcare practitioners, there's like, I mean, so many different things that someone could be doing that could be, causing them problems. And so one thing that I do is I send out very extensive questionnaires beforehand, one about the house and one about the health. And so that way I can kind of hit the ground running. I already can look through and have an idea of like what it is that, might be going wrong. And because for everyone also, when they're asking me questions later, then it's easier for me to look back and say, okay, I see you have this kind of computer, you have this kind of phone, you have this, that, because there's different, setups for everything in terms of like, especially trying to dial down the whole Wi-Fi thing. There's no just like one size fits all. So.
Yeah, so really definitely going to that hardwire. It's been something we've been talking about a lot in our house in the last couple of years too.
Yeah.
And even trying to move in this, at this time. So it's like we don't want to do too many updates before we move and then have to
Right,
do all the
right,
updates and wherever our new location may be. But
right.
at the same time too, always looking out to protect maybe the next people who would also be in this
Right,
home too.
right.
And I think it can be really eye-opening when you're actually in home and can see what it is that's going on in your physical space. How long does a typical evaluation take? I know it will depend on the size of the
Yeah,
home as well
yeah.
as the number of rooms and etc. But
Yeah, so you like again, right? It definitely depends on that. Like the older homes that are the ones from before 1965, and if they haven't had their electric started from scratch, then because a lot of times those homes it was kind of piecemeal, and that actually can make things like a lot more complicated. And single family homes are actually easier to assess than if someone's in a condo or a townhouse, then I kind of have to like walk into the common area and go up the floor above and below to kind of get more of a sense. There's just so many more things going on there. And of course, like the larger homes, like if someone has three main electric panels, I mean, that could be, obviously that's going to take a lot longer than just your typical home where you've just got, the one panel. But and a lot of it also depends on how in depth people want to go, because some people they are just mostly they're in good health. They are concerned about their children because the children now are having just EMF exposures that did not exist when we were growing up. And so they're just kind of wanting like the basic tips, that sort of thing. Some people, if they're having more health problems, it's going to be more in depth. And if someone's very electrosensitive, like they can feel everything, then those people I really need to be there a lot longer, because there's a lot of different like things with the electrical of the home that really need to be like, you know, um, uncovered and assessed. And so that those are much longer. And a lot of it has to do with the client too, because some people it's almost like, whoa, this is too much information, and they don't want me to stay as long, and then some people just, it's like a lot of questions basically. So but yeah, so for like a typical home, 4 hours is I would say a good amount of time. Yeah, yeah. So it does really just to go through and do everything. And then it also depends on the client. Like I've had clients where, they don't have much money and they're renting a room in a condo, and then I have to be snuck in when the roommates aren't there, and they don't have control over anything else. So for that, it's obviously just going to be an hour, because, and I've thought like, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to help them, but then it turned out that, I've been able to. So that's been great too as well. And if it's like, a 10,000 square foot home with like elevators and pool and stuff. I mean, that's going to be like 8 hours, like minimum. And then if we do stuff with the electrician, so that's kind of the scale. But yeah, 3 or 4 hours, is probably a typical assessment. And like I said, if people have a lot of questions, then that, would add to it. And also how much smart stuff people have too, because a lot of my clients, they're already pretty cognizant about this, and so they maybe already have gotten rid of Wi-Fi, they've already done this or that, and then they're like, oh gosh, we're still not feeling well, I guess we should have someone over. So obviously then I don't have to do that whole layer with like the smart stuff.
mm, so even in like thinking about remotes, like remotes have some form,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And so yeah, with remotes, so they it's an infrared, that's why it has to be direct line of sight. Whereas if you have radio frequency, you can do it, from really far away. But the newer remotes, there are remotes that are just radiating all the time. And so like, yeah, yeah. And so then there are different ones, like you can get replacement remotes depending upon, the situation. So that way, at least you're not sitting there with like your remote like radiating you. But yeah, things you wouldn't think of, like some of the newer smoke detectors are wireless. And so the smoke detector all of a sudden is blasting you. And then now people have these little Roomba, like vacuum cleaners, and yeah, and then even air purifiers. Like I think there's one brand where I was actually at the client's home and I turned on to see like what Wi-Fi was around on the phone, you can see that. And then it showed the next door neighbor's Dyson air purifier. It was so strong. It was like, this is like on a 1 acre property. It was like radiating
Oh my
over.
gosh.
Yeah, yeah. And so and actually because Austin Air is an air purifier that's the lowest EMF of them all. And so people can actually contact me and I have like a discount if people want to buy that, because that's the lowest EMF one. because people don't realize that with the air purifiers, even they've got a lot of people have the air purifier like right up next to their bed, thinking that they're doing something
Yeah.
healthy for them. And there's a lot of different fields coming off. And some of them you can help just by moving away. It depends on I do test for things like that, like how far away do you need certain things to be from the bed.
Wow. And then kind of going back to, the question before is like when you go back and you reassess, like if you went in and again, a chronic illness here, just you're not feeling great. And then after making the changes,
Yeah.
what kind of rate or what do you normally see as far as the resolution to the symptoms that people are experiencing? Like how long it would take them maybe to notice the
Mhm.
changes in their body or, for them to send that feedback. Oh my gosh, Mika, I feel so much better.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them, it's very quick. And so I was surprised because I had been, on such a long health journey, and people would say this is going to be 9 months, and I'd be like halfway through it, like, and for me, like almost everything I've done that has helped, even outside of the EMF realm, I'm noticing things, right away. I mean, I know one woman texted me the next morning, was like, oh my gosh, my baby slept through the night for the first time last night.
Wow.
So things, yeah, just very, very quick. And I know another client, I think he had like a very slow growing brain tumor, and then he was, back to work. I'm not sure how long that was. Not really sure, but I know that he did eventually, end up going back to work. And I'm just trying to think of different people. And it has to do a lot of it also with the types of symptoms. So something, like chronic fatigue syndrome, that's obviously not like the next day you're going to wake up and go run a marathon, because like your body has had all of these different things. I know in the chronic fatigue syndrome community, there was always that joke about those annoying people who were like, I just took this X herbal and then I had been bedridden 23 hours a day, and then I ran a marathon the next week, and so there was always like, that joke about that. Yeah. So for some things, it actually like goes kind of backward and then forward. Like I know someone had called me and she had moved into a new place and she was actually going blind. And then she realized, there's something wrong here. And she was going to have me out to test. And when she described what was going on there, I was like, can you get out of the lease? And she's like, are you serious? I'm like, I don't even think it makes sense for me to come there once she had described what it was, and and so then she actually, and I was like, I wouldn't even sleep there. I was like, go back to your parents' house, like don't just get your stuff out. Like that sounds very dangerous. And then actually she told me like it took about 2 months for it. So she had been going downhill for 2 months. And then once she was back at her parents' safe home, she was getting better over the same amount of time. So some of it, has to do with like things like that. So it's kind of hard to like generalize. It probably depends on different things. But yeah, ear ringing does take a long time to resolve. I mean, that's not something where if you've been having ear ringing, then boom, it's gone. That's one of the symptoms that really hangs in there like longer. But better sleep, that like people are feeling right away. And headaches, I think, that is something that probably is in between the two. Like you notice an improvement, but it's not going to be like, overnight. So.
Wow, that's amazing to even just to hear those example stories,
Yeah.
especially with that young gal too, and going blind. I mean,
Yeah.
these are things that we don't think about. Like the technology advances and it's just like, oh, the next thing and the new thing. And I, keep saying too, is just like, I don't want the cell phone by my daughter. And I tell my family, don't put the cell phone by my daughter. She's 17 months old.
Right.
And so I think that's like a big one. I really love the tips that you gave on, just putting it on speakerphone, putting it away, the things that they can do to make the adjustments to the phone itself. I think another big thing that might be a question is when people need to wake up in the morning with an alarm clock, like what are some of the suggestions or recommendations to actually be able to use, to wake you up?
Right. And so you can do the cell phone on airplane mode. And that then the alarm still works. But my favorite is just the old fashioned alarm clock, those little cute cube ones they have at Target. They're like 10, $12. And I have one of those. There's no lights to it or anything like that. But so it's kind of annoying because if you make up in the middle of the night, I'll like aim a flashlight at it so I can see what the time is, and because of course it would be great to be like waking up and then not wanting to open your eyes and saying, Siri, what time is it? But of course we know that you need radiation for that to work. But yeah, so that's what I do. I just have the old fashioned battery operated because the one that actually plugs in with the bright blue light and then where it's plugged in, there's actually like a lot of different fields coming off of that one. So I just, have it a couple feet away and that's, really been like for me just super helpful.
Wow, that's a really, really good tip. And you just brought up something too that I think that now so many people have in their homes, Alexa, Google,
Yes.
those
Yeah.
little, Chrome bots. Like, so even looking at those, you've seen a lot of, I mean, they're constantly on, they're constantly listening.
Yeah, yeah. No, though, yeah, and those definitely emit a lot, although it seems to fall off. It's not like the router where it can be blanketing like half the house, but when you get up close to those, it's sky high, all those little things, the Alexa and everything like that. But back to the whole symptom thing again, one thing I found really valuable is like since the lockdown started, my colleagues and I all meet and we're discussing all the cases on Zoom, which is amazing because basically, and there's only maybe like I said, there's less than 100 people who have done the building biology advanced training, but there's maybe a core group of us, maybe 25, 30 who are on all of these Zooms. And so it's just been so
Oh,
amazing to hear all these stories, so I can hear about things that I wouldn't have normally known, about the solar panels and how much they are impacting people from my California colleagues, because it hasn't really rolled out as much here. And then even I know one of my colleagues said that he was at the client's home and they're like, can you measure that spot right there? And he's like, okay. And so he measured, he's like, wow, it's really high there. And the woman started to cry and he's like, what's wrong? She's like, that's where my autistic son's crib was. And so, yeah, and I mean, that's something that a lot of us have seen, and especially pets too. Pets are much more sensitive, dogs in particular, not so much cats, where if they're in a bad spot. I mean, I had a client where 2 of her 3 dogs had passed away and the third one would not sleep in the cage. And when I measured, it was like this really, really bad spot. And so, yeah, with the pets, that's like a huge thing, where another client had called me because her rabbit lost all its fur right after they moved in. And she was like, something suspicious here, and so
yeah.
the pets really, like if your pet has cancer or something like that, that's like a huge sign, because pets, dogs used to be always living like whatever 15 years in good health, and then boom, now like so many pets, it's just like the people where there's cancer, there's all these different things that they're having.
Wow. I mean, this is just like so eye-opening. You are educating me to that degree today. I'm loving that we're connecting. I think this is so important. And I know we could probably talk for like another 10 hours here
Yeah, yeah.
about all the different things, but I guess if you just had maybe like the top couple things that you see most commonly
Mhm.
that people can take action on today,
Okay.
as their takeaways from this, besides like the phone and the alarm clock, is there anything else that, maybe we didn't talk about yet that you would
Oh,
say?
okay. Well, definitely the Wi-Fi, like, having that off at night, or then even like working to get it so that you are hardwired. That's the biggest thing by far. That's the biggest exposure in most people's homes, in terms of like things that you can easily do. Because a lot of the stuff with the wiring, you really do need someone like me to come in and be able to fix that. You can't even just call an electrician, be like, hey, electrician, what's wrong? They'll be like, there's nothing wrong. It's all the code. It's fine. And so that's something that like you really, like with my tools, I can figure out where there was an error, and not just maybe in the home, but sometimes there are errors like within the neighborhood, and then you need to like have ComEd do something, or so that I think is one of the things that people don't realize can be affecting them. I know a lot of people are concerned about the 5G and everything, and all the cell towers, but what they don't realize is even though this is like going in and everywhere, not everyone is feeling the same effects. If the background levels in someone's home are higher, they're going to be more likely to feel the effects of these things coming on. So when people are, because that's the question I get the most, is how do we protect from 5G? And it's get the levels in your home down as much as you can now, and so that way you're going to be physically stronger anyway. And then you're going to be less likely to react. And of course, then if something happens, you'll be more likely to know what it is, and it'll be easier just to do shielding for that one thing if you've already done everything else. Otherwise, it's just like, with health, if you're just focusing on this one piece of your health, then you're kind of, you don't know what's going on.
Right, you're missing the big picture.
Yeah.
There's so many things that add up to contribute to this overall load and what I call the toxic burden to our bodies that we're,
Right.
are getting now, hit from this and also from pesticides in our foods. And I mean, it's conventional practices in terms of farming, as well as like the stress load that everyone
I know.
also is experiencing in today's society too. So we do talk about that a lot. And I think this just really adds an amazing layer on, something that we haven't really tapped into much with our clients. So thank you so much for really shedding light on this and really bringing this topic to a greater attention to the detail that I really am excited to dive into more. And how can people get in contact with you so that they can experience the benefits of being able to, use your services?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one thing. I'm glad you mentioned about the chemicals, because even though we've had chemicals since the baby boomers, with this, all the different layers of radio frequency and EMFs, it's actually causing a breaching in the blood-brain barrier. So the chemicals are then affecting you much more than they did before. And so, because I know a lot of people, I don't think are aware of that connection, because a lot of us really are using a lot less chemical products, not realizing that our exposure is still going up with all the layers of the EMFs. So I wanted to just kind of add that in there.
Yeah, that's eye-opening. So then if they want to be able to work with you, what's the best? And I can put this also in the links along.
Yeah, why don't you put it in the links? And but yeah, so my number is 847-769-5135. And then my email is miekejacobs @hushmail.com. And then yeah, we'll have the links for everything else there. You'll put those. So.
Perfect. And we'll have some product links in there too, so everybody
Yeah.
can see some ideas and some recommendations that you have. I absolutely can't wait to have you come out and assess our home and be able to experience that. So stay tuned for everybody watching this for, the part 2 series.
Yeah.
And just thank you so much, Mika, for your time today. Really, really appreciate everything that you do in supporting our health and being able to really be a true advocate, especially in such a niche, of not many people doing it, 100 people in the country here. It's like such a specific profession, and you're doing so many amazing things, it sounds like, in helping all these people. So thank you for what you do.
Yes, and thank you for having me. I can't wait to see you again, and it'll be so much fun.
Awesome. Well, have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody, and we'll talk soon.